Shallal. He's one of our local luminaries. Mr. Ainley Shallal, involved in bagel distribution right now.
Distribution, right. Illicit bagel distribution.
You know, you're sort of like Dave Thomas, who passed on, but he was always a hands-on kind of guy. Remember him from Wendy's? Wendy's, you know, Where's the Beef?
Where's the Beef? What about him?
You remember Dave Thomas?
Yeah, he was, well, I don't, but
yeah. He was a hands-on kind of guy. He did commercials about being hands-on. But you are the proprietor of Busboys and Poets, which is expanding rapidly.
Expanding rapidly, right?
And threatening to take over the East Coast.
Yeah, we're working on it.
With a good word.
We're part of the occupation.
Yes, yes. But threatening to take over in a nice way. How's that?
Exactly.
What is the purpose of this event today? And your involvement is obviously very important, but what's the purpose of the event?
What's the purpose of this gathering?
Yes.
This gathering is really about getting people together and starting to sort of collectively come up with solutions that we all realize that things are going not so well for most people. And I think it's an opportunity to really kind of reassess and kind of reaffirm the fact that we're not crazy, that there's a lot of people that think like we do. Sometimes you just need that sort of mass collective energy to come up with those types of ways to re-energize yourself and be able to move forward and make the change you want to see. So I think it's great.
So it's almost like a laboratory, so to speak, of opportunity.
In a sense, I think it's a laboratory as a community, and a laboratory for each individual coming to this. You know, they start thinking more, they start talking more, they start discussing issues more, and eventually, you know, we'll come up with solutions, I think, that we all can at least feel better about than the things that we've had right now, where the gap between poor and rich is getting wider and wider every day. And, you know, it's not affecting me so much, but it's affecting so many other people, I think. I have children that are looking for work. And suddenly I'm feeling like, damn, you know, this is their, you know, their time. They should be able to find work, but they can't.
Well, I need to ask you that. I want to ask you about that. Now, I've known you since your days of Mimi's, which is a very popular establishment on P Street, and you've grown enormously. Quite frankly, in all due respect, some people would say you're rich in a sense. I mean, you have a very successful business model that's capable of expanding into Baltimore if you wanted to.
Absolutely.
So how do you relate to both sides of the track? So to speak?
I think the wealth that this country has needs to be distributed better. I think there's a problem with the fact that we spend an inordinate amount of time, an inordinate amount of money as a military. We don't really take care of the other issues. The military has such a stranglehold in our political process that it's really hard to get any movement to move forward. If we were to cut back on the military spending, allow some of that money to go into social work, social services like education, public welfare, healthcare, and all of those things, we have plenty of money to be able to go around and take care of everyone. But the fact of the matter is, the military-industrial complex has created this laundering scheme, basically taking money out of people's pockets, enriching themselves, using that money to lobby, and then get more money. So it's this big, huge wheel that's been turning and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's creating many, many more hardships for so many people, and a few people are getting very, very, very rich.
But in general, it's fair to say, though, that the military industry in other countries, in what we would consider to be our adversarial countries, such as China, who we trade with, such as Iran, such as some other places that we could name, their militaries are also very aggressive. So what does the U.S. do to manage to stay solvent in an aggressive world?
I think we need to do a much better job at how we deal with the rest of the world. We should not be so adversarial with the rest of the world. When you bomb people, when you hurt people, you're going to have more military in order to continue to do what you do. I think there's a much better approach. You know, there's much better ways to do diplomacy. But when you have such a bloated military, the military starts to call the shots, literally. They start to be able to say, you know what, we have too many adversaries, we need to go kill people. And when we kill people, we create more adversaries. So it feeds back into the system. Those people get richer and richer, and they create the fear, and the fear continues to make people subservient to the military needs. We we have. I mean, it's.
Is that just a U.S. problem, though? Don't you think that that's an international problem?
I think it's absolutely. But we spend more on the military than the next 20 countries combined. The next,
but what about North Korea? What about Iran? What about China? What about?
Those are not the countries that we want to really model ourselves after. If we are to call ourselves a democracy, if we are to call ourselves the beacon of hope for the rest of the world, this is not the way to do it. We are creating adversaries every day. I come from the Middle East, where I know that every time that a drone flies over and kills somebody that we suspect of being a terrorist, they are surrounded by so many other people that have families, children, aunts, uncles, and cousins, and so on. Terrorists get created every single day when that happens. I know. I can't tell you how many times I've read on the front page that we have just gotten the second highest person at Al-Qaeda. How many second highest people there are? And when you kill the second highest, the third becomes the second, and someone comes up.
Well, that's true. That's true. There's an organic growth. Now, let me ask you about. You did mention something about drones. Now, just recently there was a drone expo that was held at the convention center, and it was very big.
Very big.
There were some drones there that were almost as big as traditional, small planes.
Right.
So the drone market apparently is very big, and apparently other countries are really trying to jump into that. So what does that say about the international, military armaments, unmanned situation as that you referred to?
We went through the whole sort of landmines movement there for a while, where landmines were the next hottest thing, the next hottest toy for military industrial complex, and that's now become sort of out of fashion, and now the new thing is the drones. And the whole idea of the drones is that you really don't affect the population that you're supposedly trying to protect. And so it becomes sort of this unnoticed, kind of behind the scenes kind of machinery that doesn't require even being manned. Sometimes it just needs to be programmed, so the person can program it from somewhere
remotely
away. Go watch their kid's soccer game or play golf. And then come back to see what the deed has been done. And sometimes, of course, those things are not perfect. And they make mistakes, and they kill a lot of innocent people. But for some reason, we feel like these people aren't really human like we are, and therefore killing them is not such a bad thing, because you're getting rid of somebody that you feel is very evil. You continue to create this kind of system that doesn't stop. And it's time, I think, for us to really use common sense. I mean, if you ask children that if you kill people indiscriminately, you're going to create more angry people, that's an easy thing to assess. Why do we fall into that trap? Why do we think that's the only solution, by killing people?
Okay, well, that's a good point. And I actually would like to ask you, would you consider, because there are people here that obviously are unified in their belief that the military strategies that we use are very harmful to society, but we ought to talk to some of those people who are involved in the strategy and ask them what their opinion of what the situation is. I think we'd probably get, certainly an aggressive dialogue.
Well, damn, I agree 100%. If I'm stuck in that paradigm, I'm only going to see what I see. If I'm handed a box of nails, everything else is going to look like a hammer. If I'm handed a box of hammers, everything else around me is going to look like a nail. It's the way that we create the change we want to see. I mean,
but I'm asking you, would you meet with a military? Would you meet with a military spokesperson about the strategy in Afghanistan or Iraq or any other place that the Americans are involved in?
I've met with people that are in the military. I have neighbors that are in the military. We talk about these things.
And do you guys have friendly, do you agree to disagree on certain points?
I think so. At some point, you know what, the person says, somebody just sent me an email just the other day. Says, DOD's having its budget cuts, and two of my friends got laid off. So people look at the reality of their life. It's their space, it's their life. If I'm in the military and I've got my college education paid for and I've got my health care paid for, you know what, military is not so bad. And that's the problem that we've created here, is the fact that the military has become a way out for many people that are poor. It continues to grow. I mean, that's the system. I just went on a State Department mission to Cairo to create open mics in Cairo, help that movement of free speech and openness. And we went to several places where young people were energized and excited and coming in the space and really talking and speaking about issues.
Just a second, make that statement again. You're against you're against the idea of taxing.
I think taxing the rich. If you're going to tax the rich and be able to spend more money on the military, I'm totally against that.
So it's where the money goes is what you're concerned about.
Absolutely. I'd much rather give that money to organizations that I believe in, that I feel that they're going to use that money to better the world.
So you mean social programs?
Social programs.
Okay.
Education, homelessness, healthcare. All these things are key programs that we tend to sort of push aside when it comes to the military. The military gets the lion's share in everything in this country. Everything. And so for us to just tax the rich more so we can pay the military more so that we can create more enemies, so we can create more opportunity, it's just a cycle that's never going to end.
Okay.
So I'm not convinced that the idea that taxing rich is going to solve social ills. That's not going to happen. I wish that was the fact. If that was the fact, I'm all for it.
And you'd be willing to pay your share of it as well. Well, let me ask you then where the money should be going then. Are we looking at, in your mind, and this is something actually that people have asked of Mr. Barack Obama, that he's been accused of being a socialist by the Republicans.
Well, I mean, no matter what Obama says, they're going to accuse him of being
one or the other, right?
Something or another. I remember when he went to speak in front of the UN about the possibility of Palestine becoming a state. They said, "Oh my God, he's throwing Israel under the bus." Like, what? He just trashed.
And that was just before he met with Mr. Netanyahu.
Yeah, he wiped out the Palestinians off the face of the earth practically, and they're saying, "Oh, he's throwing Israel under the bus." Like, what are you talking about? You know? So there's never enough for that.
And by the way, that was just before the AIPAC meeting, which is the big Israeli meeting.
And it was like, genuflected in front of every,
that was interesting timing there.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's completely ridiculous how they corner him. No matter what he does, he doesn't do enough. And that's a
good point that you mentioned, and I'm really glad that you brought that out. Now I want to ask you about your perspective. If we were to have a real alternative, would you consider perhaps running for office? I mean,
no. You're not going to find me running for office.
Okay.
No, I have absolutely no interest in running for office. I love what I do. I think you can do far more impact on the outside than you do on the inside. I think people that run for office have a special
certain skill set. Yeah,
way about them. I don't have those skills. I don't think.
Well, you may not want to do it.
I can't lie really well. All of those things.
Is that what it takes?
I think it takes.
Is that salesmanship?
Really triangulate and create words that aren't
manipulate
language, manipulate conversation. Try to triangulate. I'm not a.
So you feel like you're too honest about?
I think so. To be a politician in a serious way.
Who do you think should run that isn't running, or someone that you know or you've met here as a result of this event? Or
I think I want a smart person to run. I think Obama is as good as any. Really. I don't think he's a bad guy. He's as good as any. I think we have an opportunity to work with someone. We have to change the system that he's under.
But the system's a capitalist system, right?
When George W. Bush was running, he was not a very smart man. I mean, really, his thought process didn't come across as being very deep. I mean, Obama at least has the synapses. Well, the right side of the synapses that is able to actually talk about history, talk about issues, have some sort of context in what he says. And therefore, it made it. I'm much more comfortable with someone like that. I know that other people will say, no, you don't want a smart bad guy in the White House. You want but for me, it's not about the guy. It's about the movement.
The policy, also the policy.
And the structures that we created that he has to work on.
But we would certainly mean the government.
Well,
and if he had, but where do you start?
Well, you start in Congress. You start in Congress by changing some of the structures, by holding to those purse strings, by making sure that we don't continue to fund a bloated military that continues to create enemies around us, so we can continue to fund it more. I mean, I'm always floored by how many advertisements there are by Lockheed Martin. Any newspaper you pick up, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics. comics, all these guys. That's money they take from the taxpayers so they can advertise, so they can take more money from the taxpayers.
But you know, technology in general is big business. We've seen it with Apple.
Yeah.
Apple has grown, computers, etc.
Technology for the use of you know, communicating with one another, creating a better world is different than the technology they use so they can, you know, pick out people from a building. That's a whole different type of technology.
Who would you speak to, by the way, if you could sit down with one person, if you had time? And I know you don't have a lot of time to do this, so fortunately you're volunteering. Who would you speak to and implore that we really look at our policies in terms of military spending? Who would that person be that you could sit down and talk to?
I don't know if it's one person. I just don't.
Well, who would you start with?
Obama would be a good start. I mean, you know.
Well, that wouldn't be a bad place to be. Yeah. You can just walk up the block and there.
I've talked to him a couple of times, you know, on a
in what context?
On a more of a social kind of sort of gathering. Get him down his ear for a couple of minutes.
Really? Were you introduced to him formally, or did you just kind of walk up to him?
I was introduced to him.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, you know, but.
And then there's his wife.
To 500 other people at
the
same time.
That's true.
You know, so it's not.
Are you a donor? So I mean, would you? Okay, so you would be in that situation. You could possibly meet him in a private. Have you met Michelle Obama?
Yeah, I have.
Have you had a chance to speak with her about military policy?
No, not about military policy.
Okay.
I've talked to her about food policies.
Food, which is something that she's very much interested in. She, in fact, shops at our farmers market, I understand, over on Vermont Avenue, etc. You are a big foodie here in D.C. People who don't know Busboys and Poets should know that it's based on a certain cultural principle that you kind of developed, I think, on your own in concert with many other like-minded people. How would you describe that principle?
Well, we like to think ourselves as a tribe, an idea of a group of people who feel passionately about issues of social justice, about issues of environmental equity, things like that. So, I mean, it's a cultural hub in a way, because for me, I believe that in order for you to create any kind of social change or political change, you have to start with cultural change. So we are a cultural hub. We bring people together to start seeing things in alternative ways. We don't do PowerPoint presentations. We don't give white papers. We get people together to see eye to eye and talk about issues. Much like what's going on here, but more in a controlled context. So I think that's what we are. We are basically a cultural hub. That's what we do.
How have you gauged the success? So you've obviously grown. I mean, your staff has grown. Your environment is really beautiful, very unique. So where's the plan? Is the plan to expand as far?
People clearly need that connection with others. I mean, you see it here, you see it in other ways. People need to connect with other people. It's not enough just to send emails to people that you know, often, or people you don't know. You know, you send out emails, you get emails back, you delete this, you delete that, you read this, you read that. You don't really get a full sense of what's happening. When you meet people face to face and talk to them, you start getting a whole different energy. Creates a whole different energy. I mean, that's the beauty of this kind of gathering here at Freedom Plaza. It's not about coming up with solutions. I'm not sure we're going to come up with any solutions on this concrete. I think what we need is to see that we're not alone, that we're not crazy, that we're part of a big movement, that there's a lot of people that think like we do, and then we go back to our communities and create the change that we all hope to see.
What do you think will be the outcome of that?
I think the outcome is energizing the movement again. I think waking people up. I think Americans are oftentimes seen as complicit. You know, they're dumbed down. They watch television, they read bad newspapers. They don't really get the full story. This is an opportunity to go beyond the newspapers, beyond the TV, beyond all that, beyond the commercial media, and say to each other, you know what? These solutions that they've been feeding us have not done really well. They've not been very good. And we can't keep thinking that we're stupid. We can't keep thinking that we're dumb. I mean, I have businesses. My businesses are grown. I don't understand Wall Street and how they structure it. I don't understand when they come up to me and they say, the world's going to end tomorrow unless we give $800 billion to these banks. I don't understand why we can't let a bank fail. I don't understand why we can't take over a bank and change the structures, the monetary structures. People think that the economy is like gravity. It's like the law of nature. It's not. The economy is created. It's a social construct. Just as we create it, we can change it.
You believe that we can change it? Now, last two questions, and then number one, what would you see, again, what would you like to see tangibly come out of this that could affect policy and affect the way the money is spent in Washington? Besides just having the right to be here, which is in and of itself is a great right, you know, but how would you like to tangibly affect, if one little thing you could see that would make you feel as though you've really spent your time here and invested it well, what would you like to see happen on Capitol Hill?
For me, I'd like to see a change in the way we address the military-industrial complex. I think military is the demise of this country. It's sucking out every resource possible. In this country, it's creating more enemies than it's solving problems. And it continues to grow unless we put a check on it. To me, that's really where you go where the money is. The bulk of our money is going